The insult that started it all. The neon glow of the orbital space station reflected off the polished floor, illuminating the bustling elite of the galaxy. Among them, Lady Syra Velner stood tall, her emerald green skin glistening under the crystalline chandeliers. She was draped in an extravagant dress, its flowing fabric embroidered with microscopic starlight particles that shimmered with every movement. Everything about her exuded wealth, power, and superiority. Across from her, Captain Jace Carter, a human pilot with sharp brown eyes and a tactical flight suit, stood with arms crossed. He was out of place among the dignitaries and aristocrats who whispered behind ornate fans and expensive hollow accessories. His presence had already drawn attention, but nothing compared to the scene about to unfold. Syra held up an ornate handbag, crafted from a rare, bioluminescent hide found only in the deepest jungles of Velnaria Prime. She turned it slightly, letting its shimmering texture catch the station's artificial light. Then, with a smirk, she flicked her gaze toward Jace and uttered the words that would haunt her for far longer than she expected. "This bag is worth more than you," she said, her voice rich with condescension. Jace exhaled slowly, suppressing the instinct to roll his eyes. He had dealt with arrogant nobles before, but something about her made his jaw tighten. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of valuing a fashion statement over an actual person. Or maybe it was the way her golden eyes gleamed with amusement, as if waiting for him to react. "Is that so?" Jace responded coolly. "Well, I hope that bag can fly you to safety when things go south." Syra laughed, a light musical sound. "Oh, please. Nothing will happen here. Security is flawless." At that precise moment, a piercing alarm blared across the station. The elegant crowd erupted into chaos as plasma bolts ripped through the air, shattering the illusion of safety. Masked assailants descended from the station's upper levels, their weapons firing with deadly precision. Screams echoed as guests scrambled for cover, their expensive gowns and tailored suits now nothing more than liabilities. Jace didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing Syra's wrist and pulling her behind a decorative pillar just as a plasma bolt seared the space where she had stood. Her eyes widened, momentarily stunned. "Still think I'm worthless?" Jace smirked. Syra blinked up at him, her earlier arrogance flickering into something resembling shock. But before she could answer, the fight was far from over. A temporary alliance. The Titan's valor streaked through the void, dodging pulse fire from the 3 unmarked ships pursuing them. Jace gritted his teeth, his fingers dancing across the controls as he executed a tight barrel roll to avoid another barrage. The ship trembled under the pressure, warning lights flashing in protest. Syra clutched the side panel for support, her eyes darting between Jace and the flashing red alerts on the dashboard. "I assume you have a plan?" she asked, struggling to maintain her composure despite the chaos. Jace smirked, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah. Don't get blown up." She shot him a glare. Inspiring. The unmarked ships adjusted their formations, trying to box them in. Jace's instincts screamed at him, these weren't random mercenaries. They were professionals. Military-grade pilots. Someone powerful wanted her dead. He exhaled sharply. "Hold on." Without waiting for her response, he cut the engines for a fraction of a second, allowing the Titan's valor to drop suddenly. The pursuers overshot, their weapons momentarily out of position. Before they could correct, Jace reignited the thrusters, slamming the ship into an abrupt vertical climb. One of the enemy ships collided with debris from the station, erupting into a fiery explosion. Syra sucked in a breath, gripping the console as the shockwave rocked the ship. "What was that?" "Evasive tactics," Jace replied, voice taut with focus. 2 more to go. The remaining ships recalibrated, adjusting to his strategy. Whoever was piloting them wasn't stupid. They weren't going to fall for the same trick twice. Syra leaned closer to the display, watching their movements. "They're hurting us." Jace frowned. Yeah. Toward what? As if on cue, a massive blockade vessel decloaked just ahead of them. Its dark metallic hull gleamed ominously against the stars, and the moment it appeared, Jace's ship was hit by a disabling EMP pulse. The controls flickered. The engines sputtered. Jace cursed under his breath as he lost maneuverability. They set a trap, Syra murmured. Jace slammed his fist against the console, attempting to reroute power. No kidding. The blockade ship engaged a tractor beam, pulling them toward its docking bay. Their pursuers fell back, their job done. Syra turned to him, golden eyes narrowing. Can you break us out of this? Jace's jaw tightened. Not with the ship offline. Syra hesitated, then reached into her sleeve, retrieving a small emergency data pad. Jace noticed and arched an eyebrow. What is that? She shot him a quick glance. A failsafe. My father insists I carry one at all times. Encrypted distress beacon. Jace let out a low whistle. And you're just now mentioning this? Syra huffed, pressing a sequence of commands into the device. I had to make sure we weren't compromised first. Jace leaned back, folding his arms. And what exactly happens when you activate it? A slight smirk tugged at her lips. Reinforcements. The distress beacon pulsed once before vanishing into the background static of space. Jace could only hope that whoever answered the call would arrive before their captors did something permanent. Because right now, they were at the mercy of whoever was waiting for them aboard the blockade ship. And Jace had a feeling things were about to get much worse. The price of survival. Security forces scrambled to contain the attack, but it was clear, this was no common heist. The attackers were too well armed, their movements too coordinated. This was an assassination attempt. Jace kept his body partially shielding Syra, scanning the room for a way out. Those aren't just pirates. They're military trained. Syra's fingers gripped his arm. The merger announcement, she whispered, her voice laced with realization. My father was supposed to finalize our partnership with the Tellarian Consortium tonight. If that deal collapses, your competitors have everything to gain. Jace finished, glancing at her. Looks like someone doesn't want this partnership to happen. More plasma bolts rained down, and Jace didn't have time to explain further. He grabbed Syra's hand and pulled her toward a side corridor. We need to get out of here, now. The announcement hall. Forget the announcement. Jace cut her off. Your life is worth more than a business deal. Something in his tone made her hesitate. She had spent years surrounded by diplomats, businessmen, and political manipulators. She was used to people speaking to her with reverence or, at worst, calculation. But Jace? His words were absolute. No flattery. No hidden agenda. Just survival. They darted through the corridor, past shattered glass and fallen guests, until they reached a docking bay. Jace's ship, the Titan's Valor, was prepped and ready, a rugged but reliable vessel, far from the luxury cruisers Syra was used to. She hesitated. I can't just leave. You can, and you will. Jace gestured impatiently. Or would you rather test if those assassins will stop at just one attempt? Syra clenched her jaw, then, with a resigned sigh, followed him up the ramp. The moment they were inside, Jace locked the ship's security system and ran to the pilot's seat. Engines flared to life, and with one powerful thrust, the Titan's Valor shot out of the station's docking bay, narrowly dodging the blast of an incoming missile. Syra stumbled as the ship swerved into high-speed maneuvers. She grabbed onto the nearest console for balance, glaring at Jace. Do you always fly like a maniac? Jace shot her a grin as he expertly dodged the pursuing ships. Only when I'm trying to keep arrogant heiresses alive. Syra huffed, folding her arms. I'm not arrogant. Jace raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Sure. And your bag isn't worth more than me. She pursed her lips, but before she could formulate a comeback, an urgent alert flashed on the ship's screen. Unmarked vessels incoming. Jace's smirk faded. They're still coming after us. Syra leaned closer, her earlier defiance giving way to a new sense of unease. They're not going to stop, are they? Jace exhaled sharply, gripping the controls tighter. No. And if we don't figure out who ordered the hit, they'll keep coming until you're dead. For the first time in her life, Lady Syra Velner felt truly vulnerable. And the only person standing between her and certain death, was the very man she had insulted. Captured but not defeated. The Titan's valor trembled as the tractor beam locked onto it, pulling them toward the looming blockade vessel. The ship's engines were dead weight, powerless under the disabling EMP pulse. Warning lights flickered across the console as Jace desperately tried to override the system, but nothing responded. Syra sat rigid in her seat, her golden eyes scanning the approaching vessel with a mix of frustration and unease. They wouldn't go through all this trouble just to kill me. Jace didn't look at her as he continued working. Maybe. Or maybe they want to make an example out of you. The ship shuddered as they were guided into the docking bay. Heavy clamps latched onto the exterior hull, securing them in place. The moment they stopped moving, an override protocol forced the main hatch to open. Jace exhaled sharply. Stay behind me. Syra, to his mild surprise, didn't argue. The airlock hissed, and a team of armored figures stormed in, black tactical suits, helmets with opaque visors, and high-powered pulse rifles trained directly at them. Not mercenaries. Private military. These were professionals. A figure stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face with sharp, calculating eyes. His uniform bore an insignia that Jace recognized instantly. Commodore Valen of the Zarkonian Trade Authority. Jace's muscles tensed. The Zarkonians weren't just another corporate-backed security force. They were a ruthless paramilitary faction known for enforcing the will of the highest bidder. Syra straightened, slipping back into the regal demeanor she wore like armor. Commodore. I assume you have a reason for violating neutral space to capture me. Valen's lips twitched in amusement. Lady Velner, I assure you, this is nothing personal. Merely business. Jace scoffed. Funny how assassinations always seem to be just business. Valen turned to him, his expression unreadable. Ah. You must be the pilot. His gaze swept over Jace with mild interest before returning to Syra. Your father has been quite resistant to certain offers. The merger threatens a carefully balanced power structure, one that many of our clients would prefer remain unchanged. Syra folded her arms. So this is extortion. Valen smiled. A persuasive measure. Jace felt his pulse quicken. And what happens if she refuses? Valen studied him for a moment, then sighed. You humans. Always so dramatic. He turned back to Syra. Your father will be given an ultimatum, either he dissolves the merger and realigns with our interests, or we ensure that his only heir never returns home. Syra's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Valen chuckled. Am I? At that moment, the ship's alarms blared. The sound of distant explosions rocked the blockade vessel, and the red emergency lights flickered. Jace felt a flicker of hope. Reinforcements. Syra's distress beacon had been answered. Escape or die trying. The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Valen snapped his head toward his soldiers. Report. A garbled voice came through his communicator. Multiple hostiles just dropped out of FTL, Velner fleet signatures confirmed. We're under attack. Syra turned to Jace, her lips curving in a small, knowing smirk. Told you I had a failsafe. Jace didn't waste time celebrating. He lunged forward, grabbing one of the guard's weapons before the stunned soldier could react. In a fluid motion, he pivoted and fired, dropping two of Valen's men before diving behind a control panel. Syra ducked, grabbing a fallen blaster as chaos erupted in the docking bay. The remaining guards fired wildly, but the ship continued to shake from the external bombardment, throwing off their aim. Valen snarled, activating a shield module on his wrist that deflected incoming fire. Contain them. Don't let them. Before he could finish, a massive explosion rocked the docking bay, rupturing part of the hull. The emergency force fields activated just in time to prevent decompression, but it sent crates and debris flying in all directions. Jace grabbed Syra's wrist. Time to go. They sprinted toward the docking platform, where the Titan's Valor was still locked in place. Jace fired at the clamps, but they remained stubbornly in place. Syra tapped into the nearby control panel, her fingers flying across the interface. I can override the lockdown, but I need a minute. Jace took cover, laying down suppressive fire as more guards stormed into the bay. He knew they were running out of time. Then, through the comms system, a familiar voice crackled to life. Hold tight, kid. We're coming in hot. Jace grinned. Captain Orlan Dren, an old friend and a smuggler with a talent for making dramatic entrances, was leading the rescue force. From outside, the station shuddered as plasma torpedoes struck its external defenses. The blockade vessel's forces were too busy fighting off Syra's fleet to stop what was coming next. A second explosion breached the docking bay entrance, revealing a sleek, heavily armed gunship. Jace saw the mounted cannon swivel, tearing into the guards with pinpoint precision. Orlan's voice rang out through the comms again. Doors are open. Get that ship moving. Syra shouted in triumph. Lockdown disabled. Go. Jace leaped into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying across the controls. The Titan's Valor roared to life, and with a deafening blast, the clamps disengaged. Hang on. The ship lurched forward, speeding toward the open hangar as enemy fire whizzed past them. Behind them, Valen clutched his bleeding arm, his face contorted in fury. You won't get far, Velner. But Syra, for the first time in her life, grinned recklessly. Watch me. With that, the Titan's Valor shot into the void, the docking bay exploding behind them as Syra's fleet overwhelmed the blockade vessel. They were free, for now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. No safe harbor. The Titan's Valor soared through the debris field, its engines burning hot as Jace pushed the ship to its limits. The explosion from the blockade vessel still flickered behind them like a dying star, but the danger was far from over. Syra collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard as she clutched the armrests. I can't believe we just did that. Jace smirked, eyes fixed on the navigation screen. That makes one of us. Syra's fleet had won the battle, but not without consequences. Reports were already coming in through the encrypted channel. The attack on her life had sent ripples through the interstellar political landscape. The Velner Consortium's rivals were making moves, trying to capitalize on the chaos. And worst of all, someone on the inside had orchestrated this. Jace's grip on the controls tightened. We need to disappear for a while. They'll come after you again. Syra nodded, rubbing her temples. Agreed. But where can we go that my enemies can't reach? Jace considered their options. There were no safe harbors, not in this part of the galaxy. Every major station was compromised, and heading back to Velner Prime would be like flying straight into an ambush. Then, an idea struck him. I know a place. Syra raised an eyebrow. You say that like it's a bad idea. Jace gave her a wry smile. Because it is. But it's the only one we've got. He punched in the coordinates, and the Titan's Valor veered into a hard course correction, leaving the wreckage behind. Their destination? The dead zone. A sector of uncharted space, a graveyard of forgotten wars and failed colonization attempts. No laws. No governing bodies. Just the desperate, the dangerous, and the damned. If they were going to lay low and figure out who wanted Syra dead, this was the only place they wouldn't be found. Or at least, so Jace hoped. The dead zone. The moment they dropped out of FTL, Syra knew they had made a mistake. The dead zone was a graveyard. Massive, derelict ships floated in eerie silence, their hulls breached and long since abandoned. Some had been lost in wars centuries ago, others were the remains of failed expeditions, their crews swallowed by the void. And yet, there were signs of life. Jace's sensors picked up faint energy signatures, smugglers, warlords, and scavengers who made a living among the wreckage. Syra frowned. You used to operate out here. Jace didn't look at her. For a while. Before I got smart. Syra sighed. And now we're back. A voice crackled over the comms. Unregistered vessel, state your business or be fired upon. Jace flipped the switch. Relax, old man. It's me. There was a brief silence, then a chuckle. Jace Carter. Haven't heard that name in a while. A massive, rusted docking station flickered to life in the distance, a hidden outpost buried within the wreckage of an ancient battleship. Jace guided the ship inside as Syra crossed her arms. Who exactly are we meeting? Jace grinned. The only person crazy enough to hide in a place like this. As they landed, the ship's ramp lowered to reveal a towering, cybernetic man with mechanical arms and a grin full of metal teeth. Jace Carter, you son of a... Jace held up a hand. Good to see you too, Rax. The cybernetic smuggler chuckled. What the hell are you doing in my corner of the void? Jace glanced at Syra, then back at Rax. We need to disappear. Rax's grin widened. Then you came to the right place. The truth in the shadows. Jace followed Rax through the dimly lit corridors of the hidden outpost, his senses on high alert. The station, once a proud battleship, now served as a refuge for those who had no place left in the galaxy. It was a graveyard turned sanctuary, where smugglers, mercenaries, and exiles thrived under their own twisted version of order. Syra walked beside him, her golden eyes scanning their surroundings. She was a long way from the opulence of her world. But instead of disgust, Jace saw something else in her expression. Curiosity. Maybe even admiration. Rax glanced over his shoulder. So, you finally pissed off the wrong people, huh? Jace smirked. You could say that. Rax's grin widened, revealing his metallic teeth. I always knew you'd be trouble, Carter. But bringing a Velner heiress to my doorstep. That's a new level of crazy. Syra folded her arms. I can hear you, you know. Rax chuckled. Oh, I know, princess. The question is, why should I risk my operation to hide you? Syra stepped forward, her confidence returning. Because I can pay. And because whoever tried to kill me, is bigger than you think. Rax's cybernetic eye flickered as he studied her. Bigger than the Zirconians? Jace nodded. They had an inside source. Someone close to her family. Rax exhaled sharply. Corporate betrayals. Always messy. He rubbed his jaw. All right. I'll help you. But I need something in return. Jace groaned. Knew this was coming. Rax ignored him. The Zirconians have been running a secret operation in this sector. Weapon testing. Experimental ships. Stuff they don't want on the record. If you want to find out who ordered the hit, I need you to break into their relay station. Syra arched an eyebrow. Let me guess, you've tried before. Rax grinned. Tried and failed. Their security's too tight. But with you too. We might stand a chance. Jace exhaled. We don't have a choice, do we? Rax clapped him on the back. Nope. Breaking the code. Under the cover of darkness, the Titan's Valor approached the Zarkonian relay station, a heavily fortified satellite buried in the wreckage of an old warship. Jace navigated through the debris, keeping the ship's signal cloaked. We need to move fast. Once we breach their system, they'll know we're here. Syra nodded, already working on the console. I can bypass their security protocols, but I'll need time. Jace guided the ship into position while Rax and his team prepared the breaching drones. The moment they landed, the drones went to work, burning through the external doors. Alarms blared. Jace cursed. They know we're here. Move. The moment the door burst open, they stormed the relay station. Inside, the corridors were filled with automated turrets and heavily armed Zarkonian operatives. Gunfire erupted as Jace and Rax provided cover while Syra made her way to the central server. A security officer lunged at her, but she dodged, grabbing his wrist and twisting. To Jace's surprise, she slammed the attacker into the console, knocking him out cold. He raised an eyebrow. Where'd you learn that? Syra smirked. I may be an heiress, but I'm not defenseless. Jace chuckled. Remind me not to underestimate you. She plugged into the system, her fingers flying across the controls. Almost there. Outside, more Zarkonian ships began arriving. Rax's men fought to hold the entrance, but they were getting overwhelmed. Rax shouted over comms. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Syra broke through the final firewall, her eyes widening. I have it. The name of the informant. Jace fired off another shot. Who is it? She stared at the screen, her face pale. My father's chief advisor. Director Vascor. Jace felt his stomach drop. The man had been at Syra's side since childhood. Syra clenched her fists. He sold us out. Jace didn't hesitate. Download everything. We need proof. She grabbed the data chip and ejected from the console. Jace tapped his comms. Rax, we're pulling out. They fought their way back to the Titan's Valor, dodging fire as the ship's turrets provided cover. The moment they were inside, Jace hit the thrusters. The ship blasted out of the station just as it erupted into flames behind them. The betrayal. Back at the outpost, they reviewed the data. Director Vascor had been feeding information to the Zarkonians for years. Syra stared at the files, her expression unreadable. Jace sat beside her. You okay? She didn't answer at first. Then, she turned to him, something hard in her eyes. He betrayed my family. My people. Jace nodded. What do you want to do? Syra took a deep breath, then exhaled. We go home. Jace blinked. Wait, what? She looked at him, fire burning in her golden eyes. I'm done hiding. My father needs to know the truth. And Vascor needs to answer for what he's done. Jace studied her for a long moment, then smirked. You're a lot more dangerous than I gave you credit for. She smiled. And you're not as worthless as I thought. Jace laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. As the Titan's Valor soared toward Velnor Prime, Jace knew one thing for sure, this wasn't the end of their story. Not by a long shot.